Hello everybody, welcome to my acrylic painting session, and today we are focusing on how we can paint wild garlic flowers, a lovely spring landscape with a little stream, beautiful trees which is just picking up some of the early green leaves, and these gorgeous lush green segments, big leaves and flowers of the garlic. Now, I'd love us to have focus on scene shapes. There are loads of details of light, of flowers, of individual stems here and there, but I'd love us to focus on scene shapes and in being able to recreate that light by scene shapes. So we can use some details at the end, but let's start from the big spaces. So on my palette, I have 4 warm colors and 2 cool colors. Well, violet's kind of different between. I'll put it into the warm colors today. So I have some white, yellow, cadmium yellow, ochre, crimson, violet, and then, so violet in this case, if I were to mix them together with the other warm colors, will be more warmer color. If I start mixing it with my blue and green, it will become more of a cooler color. So for the true cooler colors, I've got some ultramarine blue and emerald green. And I have a range of brushes with me. Now I picked up an ochre background to show the light, the sunny day. So the yellow, kind of yellowish ochre color will help me out with that, even if painting is not finished, even when it's been built up. So I might leave some of that color in certain places, but if it will get covered, it will still help me building up my layers. So I'm going to start using my round synthetic brush for sketching. So I'll use some ochre and some violet. I'll mix them together and make it quite watery, so I can sketch with that color very easily. Okay, and let's analyze our photograph. So if I were to divide the piece into the photograph into half, horizontally, it gives me an opportunity to see how much space the garlic flowers are taking on the foreground. So if my picture is divided, my portrait way format will be divided into half. So my garlic flowers will need to go a little bit higher than that. Okay, and it probably starts from that halfway through point. So roughly, they will be coming up and down. So there wouldn't be a precise line, but it just gives me an idea of that space here. Now, on the top part of the painting, I can see just a little bit of a broken bank of that woodland. It almost mirrors the angle I just done earlier here. It almost mirrors that shape. Can make it up and down a little bit more, but it almost comes out there. That up and down is going to come from the space of the garlic flower, so both lines will be quite good there. Okay. And then I'm going to look at some of my key trees. So the tree which is close to us is almost a V shape. One branch is, well, one part of the tree trunk is leaning towards the right. Another one, quite a big one, stands a bit more stronger, and they're parting quite far from the ground. They're quite staying strong together. I'm just gonna block them in so we can see them together more as a silhouette. Actually, it might give me an opportunity to tweak that shape. If I would have just done the lines, might have been harder to see it, but actually maybe this one, maybe there are some other trees or some other darknesses, just feels that width could come slightly stronger. That's a bit better. Maybe there are some other branches like this one, maybe there will be some other ones, but overall the tree trunks are quite powerful in their silhouettes here. Okay. Might make even a tiny bit more of an angle for it to have an overall V shape. Okay. It will be going under the behind the flower, so I might just bring that tree trunk a little bit lower. Right. And then my other two groups of trees. So I've got loads of slender trees on the left-hand side. So maybe if I'll group them, that also might give me an opportunity to decide if I need to have more space for that area. If I'll just roughly place them as a group of loads of lines, you could have even put them as just a dark, kind of combine them all and paint the green in the gaps of sky afterwards. Instead of painting very delicate fine lines, I might just group them up like that. But it actually tells me that my bank might be a little bit too high. I think I might just drop these trees a little bit lower here and maybe drop my bank, my woodlands bank. But that's all good, because by the time we raise that surface, it's going to be in the shadow there anyway. Okay. Quite tall, slender trees. Maybe they'll just need to go a little bit more forward, not just stop on the bank, and maybe that's what will make it more exciting. So that's not just two trees, it's a group of trees there. Okay. Some might be more leaning, some might be a little bit more straight. So they might look a little silly at the moment. Okay. Now the far end of the painting, where we can see the bank, I might use a little bit of a shadow using the same ochre and violet, just to have a plan for some of my darknesses. I think part of, so this is my flowers. Okay, maybe a little shadow is going to come down a little lower here. And then behind the trees, across there. Okay, I'm happy with that. And there will be subdivisions of where the where the garlic flowers will come in, where there will be some more shadows. We'll work with that with color. And then we can come back to the foreground. And within all of the area here, within all the flowers, the first thing I see is a little bit of a path coming from that bank. Yeah, and a slight diagonal comes in here. This is just a rough placement for us of some shadows. And then I can plan a big plant almost like, well, it's a group of plants here where we can see quite a lot of leaves. So if we just plan it roughly here, okay. Something going on here where we can see more open leaves and some maybe branches. Maybe there's a path so that some of them been bent and flattened. And then within a similar way, I can see an oval of, I'm making them almost like an oval, a circle, because those shapes, the leaves are curving up and where they're taken, just gives me that simplified way of looking at it. Okay. And in this corner, because I've got that again semicircle here, there will be other leaves further back, kind of within that range of shapes, how they're spreading out. And I can see how some of the leaves here. So that's all we need, is that direction of leaves and shapes, approximately. So if this circle comes here, the other leaves gonna start merging, kind of a path, not merging, creating a almost like a path of leaves there, yeah. And then all the flowers will come on the top. We don't need to worry about them. If you wanted to give yourself an idea of vertical lines. Okay. What I will do next, before I start looking at the details for the leaves of the foreground, I'd love to separate the size of the garlic flowers into different range where they are situated. So for example, at the far end, it might be about that size. Kind of middle ground somewhere here, there might be slightly bigger. Somewhere even close, they're getting slightly bigger here. Just looking, picking up a couple of different shapes. And then right close to me here, I can see a big shape, big chunk of them. So I can't even fill it in. So I'm looking at those umbrellas, looking at those hats, shapes. There's another one quite like that one. And then maybe mingling in between. We will spread the individual flowers afterwards, but that's kind of gives me an opportunity to see the scale. Okay, so very large ones here, medium ones, smaller ones, and tiny ones at the back. And the far end, all we'll see just the white spaces there. So somewhere here I can see another one, and I can, this one is a little bit squashed, so I might extend it and create my own extra pressure. Flowers. Okay. Now, as much as tempting to do some of the leaves, we can get lost in them. Maximum I would do is thinking of some of the middle lines of the leaves, so kind of giving them a little bit of a direction. It will be much easier to do all these leaves with color straight away, with shapes of color. So if I roughly give them directions, if you're not sure about the directions, you can even leave it out. Otherwise, it's too many things going on and it's very easy to get lost. I might not even do much in this corner because it's looking too complex for the line drawing. And I'm going to double check if I've forgotten anything major. I think we're good. So our drawing is finished. We can now start working with color. Right, so the first color I'd love us to work into some of the browns, some of the trees, some of the banks, some of the shadows of the soil on the soils areas. Some of them will be very warm and some of them will be a little bit cooler. Now we'll work into them on top of our existing shapes just to get extra texture and extra depth to it. So I'm going to go for the same colors, some violet and some ochre, but this time it's not going to be diluted. It's going to be much more solid. And let's start with some of the more stronger shadows first, and we can slowly make the texture varied and the darkness varied. So it's almost violet-y than kind of more into the ochre, so much more darker tone. So you can preserve some of your existing browns on the trees, but working into some quite dark tones is good as well. So let's work. We've got the light somewhere probably from behind of our trees, maybe more kind of behind towards excuse me, towards the left-hand side. So I'm immediately running out of paint, so I need to top it up. So it is much thicker paint now. So I'll keep the darker tones on my trees a little bit more on the left. Will be a tiny bit of a shadow on the right-hand side. Now, for this tree, there are loads of small branches, there are loads of perhaps even tree trunks behind it. So it's okay to just cluster a little bit of shapes. I'm not sure what exactly they are, but I will break them up with some greens and some lights and highlights to have the impression of the distance. And the tree here will have some nice darks. Again, I can work within its character, within the lighter tones afterwards. So far, I just want to build up some darks. If your color slightly changes from more violet to a little bit more ochre, that's good. You can also use a dab of crimson to make that variations. Might not be a huge jump in color, but it's okay to bring it in here. Now what I've done as well, my flowers line is way above this root lower section of the trees. I've done it deliberately lower so my flowers can overlap and the shadow is already present there, so I don't need to worry about it afterwards. I think that's really quite good. And my other trees, this time I could be a little bit more accurate with where the darkness is going to go, but I don't have to be too precise still. As I said earlier, we can paint the gaps between the trees later on. What I will do, I will focus on some of the darknesses of my trees. I'm going to vary them for different trees. Some of them will have darker segments in the middle. Some of them will have darker points at the base. It's probably how the light is spreading. Some of them will have very dark tones at the top. So it's okay for them to be a little bit more mingled and a little bit not, don't have to carry one tree trunk from top to the bottom. It's more of an impression of it than too precise. So I'm still on the same colors and I'll do those two group of two trees and perhaps them more at the back. And don't be scared of making them kind of going further into the bank or into the grasses, even if we've done other shapes. Over them, cut. Not too sure about that cross line. Will be loads of branches, so I might just leave extra browns there. Okay. Can also see something halfway through, maybe not quite in the middle. Some sort of branch, something showing there. So I might just mingle a few shapes, few lines, and a little bit more browns for this tree as well. So playful, but not too precise or specific. It's just to have a little bit of brown when we start painting our green. So we might just have that color present here and there when we start painting our greens. Now also we have a similar warm color for part of the soil showing, part next to the stream. So I'm going to go for, again, extra violet and ochre. And just to show, there's some nice darker green shadows, but there are very dark areas of just exposed soil where the stream, next to the stream, so maybe that's why we've got shadows there more. Maybe those trees will cast a bit of shadows, maybe there will be a bit of that bank at the back, how it's going around. So the stream is kind of meandering around, perhaps even coming somewhere close to our tree here. That's why it has lots of shadows here. So I might just put a little bit of extra darknesses here in preparation for some extra shadows in this area. Feels like some nice dark shadows coming close to our flowers, right? And kind of middle ground for the size of our flowers. So, and I'll paint it so it's drawn a shape over flower here, but I need a shadow here. So I'm going to paint over it and perhaps just give myself an idea of some sort of shadow here as well. So I'm playfully kind of planning that stream, which probably comes up here. Maybe it disappears on the right-hand side for us. And maybe slightly lighter version of that brown, using just a little bit more ochre. For where our path is formed, I might just place a few darker strokes. Again, they will get lost in the process partially, but it will be good to have them as a little bit of a prep. Reflecting less. Okay, and another corner. We started coming to some cooler browns now as well. So I'm going to pick up some ultramarine and mix it with my violet and ochre. I can use a dab of white with it as well, because if you don't, all you'll end up is very dark color, almost black looking. But now I have almost like a grayish violety blue. Okay, and I can use that for this corner somewhere here. We're going to have loads of greens here. So if I'll have this little part of the path exposed to some of the cooler browns. Again, ignore all the leaves. I'm just looking for rough space of my soil area, kind of exposed areas. So the large areas you'll cover, the better. If you'll do more than I have done, that's fine as well, because we'll work with the colors afterwards. And let me see if I can do it that way. That's better. Okay, let's redirect the light here. Gonna get some more of that bluey violet color as I'm running out. So ultramarine, violet, ochre, some white. Okay, it's quite an exciting grayish color. And I can spot a couple of shadows. A little bit cooler, flatter shadows, perhaps, for my distant banking. So if the darknesses we've done were almost leaning forward segments of the bank, now we're looking more kind of at the tops where some of the grasses will start appearing shortly. Also slightly lighter tone we're using now will give us a bit more easy understanding of the space, the distance. Okay, maybe something there. Just checking any, if I've got loads of similar brown, maybe I'll just break it down a little bit. And is there anything on the trees I can do in a cooler color like this? Maybe a couple of shapes will have a little bit of that coolness. Maybe this tree on the right hand side has some lighter segments of the bark. So maybe that will have a little bit of that light. Well, it's a lighter tone within the dark. Okay. Then now let's go for a little bit of lighter tones. So I'm going to start with some white. And this time, if I were to use my ochre and violet, I'm going to leave a lighter version of it. So because I'm using white, I can control how much ochre and violet I'm bringing in. Simply by, well, because it's the white tells me much more clearer. Okay, so I might just go a tiny bit more into the, don't want to go too light. I can check it against my trees. Now if I'll put a little mark there, and it might be a little bit too light. I want some medium tone. So I might need a help with some of crimson. I want to have a bit of extra warmth. Okay, let's check that darkness here. That's better. Okay. Now I don't want my trees to be yellow, or don't want them to be overly red. but that warmth of the red is present, warmth of the ochre is present. Right, so let's just place few areas. Again, they're a little bit bulky, but they might just bring tiny bit of that extra sub color. Okay, but try to keep them as shapes, as I keep saying. And some of those branches I've been drawing, or maybe I can add a little bit of extra branches. So loads of texture on these trees. I don't know if I want to do as much texture there. I might just have a little bit more of a shape to the trees. It doesn't help that it's reflecting at the moment. Okay. Now that the trees in the distance, I might put a little bit of that reddish color to the base, because I think on the higher branches, higher sections of the tree trunks, I think I'm going to put a little bit of green there, as the leaves are coming through and overlapping the tree trunks, so I might have more of a exciting effect there. But this warmth of the red, I think if I'll add a bit more white to it, I think I'm going to be coming to a lighter tone of the soil. And a distance here, there's a lit up area. Might be a little bit too red. I think more kind of violet, an extra white. It's like a dry, exposed segment of the soil. Maybe the stream was wider and now it's exposed, the soil, now it's dried as well. So yeah, maybe this one is a little bit calmer. Just the block of the lit up area. I will put some more highlights on it, but that's my initial starting point. And I might do a little bit of semi-highlights, well, kind of using the same colors, using the same darkness for my path, just a little bit here and there. That might be my highlights on the path, making something different. By the time I'll have again the green leaves, I might lose some of these sections, but it's, if I don't, if I preserve some of it, naturally how it stays, it will be not just a blank space, but we're already planning some of the colors there. That would be really good. Okay. And then if I'll wipe my brush, have a little bit of extra fresh color. I'm gonna go for lighter brown, using some extra white, whatever is left on my brush, and some ochre. So it's a lighter tone, but I have got quite a lot of earlier brown on my brush. Now if I'll go on its own, that's color on its own will be good. For some of the segments of the trees, don't be scared of making them slightly wider, because by the time we'll get the greens, we can shrink the size of that width. So maybe a little bit more here, maybe some will come up. Now, because it's a lighter tone, it's a little bit clashes with my ochre, so might be harder for you to see. Again, the color is quite thick. It's not too runny. It's not massive chunks, but it is a substantial volume, so it could go over the colors are painted, especially the darker tones. Maybe there will be a little glowing light eventually here in this tree. Not interested in the small branches. You see a little bit of extra light on the bank here. Not sure if that's going to remain in this light brown color, or maybe I'll need to come back to it in very light green, but while I have got that light, I might just touch it up. And then this light could go over my lit up area, just a little bit of extra space. Now it's quite a wet area, so painting over it for me is a little harder, but it might be softer. I might have to still come back to it. But it will be nice and settled if it's soft. Okay, so we've got some browns, and I did mention a very light green. So to this lighter brown, if I were to add some emerald green and some extra yellow and white, I just want to make almost a browny green, a lighter version of a browny green. As some of my trees become a little bit more greener than brown, also into the light areas. Okay, maybe slightly darker, otherwise it becomes too similar in light or highlights. Again, it's looked good on my palette, but I had to mix it, so place it on my painting to know. Okay, let's try this one. Okay, still quite greenish, needed to be a little bit more woody. Maybe a bit of that extra ochre. You can just see this tree has a little bit of that color. Now, if you don't do that now, it's okay as well, because by the time we start adding more greens with an backdrop, you might end up using the color of the leaves to touch it up, but it just feels right at the moment here. I might just touch this a little bit more. This bigger tree. It also varies my browns. In a way, that's my vegetation here anyway. Okay. So just a little bit here and there, some of that greenish brown. I'm going to be using more or less the same color for the earlier shadows. Anyway, so we're just kind of linking the green to the browns, and then we'll be linking that brownish green to fresher, exciting greens. Right, now let's have a look at some of our greens, some of our darker greens. Now, I quite like some of the greens already mixed here. So I'm just going to use the same combinations. Emerald green, I'm going to put quite a lot of it now. I'm going to use some ochre as the base, as I want my color to be warmer. I don't want it to be cool. I don't want just to stay with emerald green. Okay, and we used quite a bit of violet. To make the color darker and even more kind of further away from that coolness of the emerald color. Now it's looking quite dark. I might just add a tiny bit more ochre to it to make it slightly lighter. If I have to add white, I will, but I think at this stage, just a little bit of ochre is enough. Ochre contains quite a lot of white. Okay, something similar. Any of those variations would be really fine. Depends what other colors you already have. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to do almost like an underpainting for my leaves. I'm going to, if I were to squint my eyes by looking at the photograph, I'll start seeing more shadows around the flowers and fresh garlic flower leaves. So what I'm going to do, I'm going just to create a lot of darker shadows before I start painting my lighter leaves. So maybe, and they will be roughly in the direction of the leaves. The kind of strokes might remind me of the leaves, but it doesn't have to be. So let's say I have an area of darkness somewhere here. Now I've got my flower here, but I'm going to paint over it. So I have almost like a block of darkness coming here on the right. Okay. So that will be our sequel. So the darkest color for the range of colors to come. I'm also merging them, kind of combining all these colors, coming close to my darker browns for the soil. Okay. So I'll have a little bit more extra darker green around the browns here. And also around my path. Again, almost as if I'm just preparing those shadows to be embraced by the greens. Just a little bit around it. If it's a little patchy, mine's ended up a tiny bit patchy, that's okay. That might be the edge of my flowers then. And then at the foreground, again, I'll just go around some of my shapes, my violety browns. Don't need to think too much about it. Just go on the borders with those colors. Painting something extra around, not perfectly around as an outline around the brown shapes, but kind of close to them. Chop into them a little bit more. Some of these shapes. So it's preparing those darknesses for us to be here soon. Now there are loads of darknesses under my flowers, but the flowers will be overwhelming. If I paint just the flowers on top, will be so much harder to do all the shapes. A few leaves and shadows are here as well. So in a way, I'm creating strokes, which perhaps will be shapes of the leaves, but at the same time, it is a shape altogether. And I can see a little bit of similar darker green at the back. Just gonna come close to my trees here so the trees don't have any glowing ochre next to them. And perhaps a space here. Quite a dark green. And I'll do the tops of the banks. Just a little bit more there, again, integrating into our browns gently. Maybe just small quantities in comparison to the foreground. Maybe just a little corner. If you overdo it, we can always put some lighter greens on top. Maybe just offset some of this. There's a little bit of darkness on the top right corner, so I might just put it just to show. Maybe there will be that bank is going much more steeper. We will see a bit of sky on the top middle left corner, but we can't see much sky there, so maybe there will be more heavier vegetation in that area, or heavier leaves, or something is changing now. Maybe next to my darker shadows, tiny bit more. Again, just variation of it. Do apologize that it's reflecting. Right, so at this stage, the painting looks quite dull. So the ochre background is the only one which keeps it a little bit more cheerful. But we're now ready to start introducing some sunny greens. So I'm going to use a larger flat brush. And I'm going to have a medium-sized filbert brush ready for my big shape sleeves. And I want to still see shapes starting from the background. So let's have a little bit of water in the brush. I'm going to go for some white, some cadmium yellow, so that's nice and bold and strong, some emerald green. That will be my base. It might look a little bit too strong and fluorescent in comparison to the rest of our much more settled colors. So as we're starting with, again, slightly darker medium tones for the background, I'm going to add a tiny bit of violet to it. And it just tones it down, that jumpy, maybe a tiny bit of ochre as well. So it just makes it less fresh. So we know how to make a fresh green now, and we'll use those just cadmium yellow and emerald green later on. But for now, we also edited a bit of violet and a bit of ochre. So let's go and find out some of the spaces here. Now it will immediately start looking much more bolder and stronger in color. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to fill my gaps between the trees. For now, if I'll just focus on more or less covering the ochre background, I think that might be a little bit too light color actually. So let's just add a tiny bit more green and violet. Okay, if it's too dark, again come back to some more yellow and ochre. Okay, let's test it here. Okay, that's better. So let's fill the gaps close to the trees. And let's create a bit of light. Well, it's a medium green, but it will be the lightest green we've done so far. So the flat brush helps me to come close to the tree trunks lines and keep the shapes a little bit more straighter, kind of in the shapes of the branches or gaps between the trees. So far, I'm just filling the spaces up. Okay, I can kind of evaluate and look into it a little bit better afterwards. Looks like a nice glow of the tree within a similar green. Maybe that's will come in at some point later on. Right, where the same color is going to be here in between the branches. If I'll see a very bold light green and I want to leave it out for now, that's fine. Now where the spaces of the blue are going to be, I think if you want to leave them out you can, but much easier to just paint over them and then place the fresh blue over it. So I'm going to shrink some of my tree trunks here. I come close to some of the banks. If some of the tree trunks or branches will partially disappear, that's okay. Just kind of work your way around them. Very easy way to thin down some of those shapes. So if they're more remaining as partially hidden shapes, that's fantastic. They need to appear and disappear anyway. So you're already doing it then. Okay. Actually, I had that super light tone and it's already helped me to create a little bit of extra depth. So I'm mainly gonna go for the low area and I might leave a little bit of ochre at the higher points just to give me again reassurance that I'm working in the right tone. Okay. Now my big brush is easy to use. So let's place some of that as well here on the area where some of the flowers are going to be. And I think I also need a smaller brush. I might go for filbert brush, a medium-sized filbert brush. There we go. So I'll mix more color and I'll start working a little bit more into the leaves of my garlic flowers. So same process. Emerald green, a little bit of yellow and ochre. I think maybe more ochre at the moment, and a little bit of violet. Make it a tiny bit more lighter with the use of ochre. Now we're covering bigger spaces now, so keep using quite a lot of paint. Otherwise, colors will stay quite transparent. Double check that I've got a similar color. It's a little bit darker. What can I do with my darker color? Before I'll make it lighter, it is quite a nice color. I can use a slightly darker color, maybe to dab in that color for some of my in-between tones. Can you see that's what's happening now? I have my lighter version, I've got my medium version, I've got my slightly darker green. So if you have mix at any point slightly darker tones, preserve it, they will always come handy. So that slight variation is wonderful to see. Okay, not too much, but just a little bit of that. Right, and I can continue. Right, can I use a slightly darker version anywhere on my leaves? I think maybe somewhere in the foreground here. I can see a few big shape leaves. Just looking at some of the directions. So I've lost the shapes of my flowers, but again, still roughly know where they are. Okay, maybe some more big shapes. Don't be scared of taking the leaves off the painting. Those don't have to stay too precise and accurately within those shapes. Okay, maybe something here. I'm almost filling in the rest of the spaces now. You know, what's been left with a tiny bit lighter tone. If you can have smooth edges, so I ended up with a tiny bit of dry brushing edges here, and that's not so good because just in case if that will end up as part of our leaf corner, so make sure that you have smooth edges. Okay, I'm just filling up some of those spaces. And perhaps here as well. Again, the shapes of the leaves are easy to do with a flat brush. A big block here, perhaps, for now. And maybe a little bit of something coming through. The closer the shapes come towards me, the wider they will be. I'll do some of those planned, pre-planned white. Again, it's a little bit still patchy here somehow. Okay, a little bit thicker paint and that gets fixed. That's good. So I went for a little bit extra darker tone, but I think now I can go for bolder, stronger, lighter green. So I went for some yellow, ochre, emerald green. That will start being perhaps even tiny lighter. While my foreground is going to be drying, I'm going to start touching it up with at the back. So it's like our painting is slowly waking up. So I've got loads and loads of shadows, and then slowly the sun will start coming through now. So my slightly lighter green, I'm going to fill some more space. No, that's too dark. Okay, next to the trees, that's too dark, so I might need to go for more white and yellow to make that effect. So let's find some of the sunnier greens. So I'm using a smaller filbert brush, synthetic brush. And let's have a look for some of that light. Just little dabs following the light. And put a little variety of that light lower. And put a couple of leaves, lovely exciting leaves going over the tree trunk here. Just make them different sizes if you can. Maybe some more light behind our tree here, which will turn partially into glowing light, or some vegetation behind it, but also offset our tree trunk here. Not sure about that shape yet, but I like the shape next to the tree. So I'm going to stay with that for the moment. Okay, maybe something will be in between. That's better, just blended it almost, rather than giving it too sharp silhouette here. Maybe some more individual light. It's immediately giving quite a lot of space to the area. Just tiny bit of green line or kind of little shape next to the tree trunk just creates that wonderful, wonderful depth behind it. Or next to a branch, kind of it elongates the branch, it gives it direction. Okay, that's good. Let's play with some more of this light between the tree trunks and make them a bit more narrow as well. Maybe a bit of light at the higher points. Quite like to offset this tree with a bit of light. In my actual photograph, there are more darkness in this area, but I think it just works really well to have some extra green here. So I'm going to stick with the lighter green here for now. And if I feel it needs changing, then I'll amend it. Let's bring some of this lighter green for this little island of far distant garlic flowers. And this corner. Just a little bit showing of the bank directions here. That's kind of how some of the grasses may be going gently over that slope, might give us an opportunity to show what's happening in the far distance. Just those lovely slopes gently create that space. Okay, I'm happy with that. Still waiting for the leaves on the foreground to dry. So I might have a clean brush and pick up tiny bit of blue. So for my sky, so if we'll have some fresh white and ultramarine. Now, phthalo blue might be better color here, but we can make it close to phthalo blue by using a fresh emerald green. Mix it really, really well. So we're still into the blue, but it's much more happier sky blue. To know if it's the right darkness, we have to place it in our painting. Yeah, that's worked out quite nice. Sometimes tiny bit darker blue is better than too light. Too light blue in kind of between the branches might appear as white. So we need to make sure that it does look blue rather than whitish. Okay. And as I have a lot of green in the area, just need to make sure I do top up my fresh blue and kind of mix, make sure there's no smudgy green in there. I decide how much of that blue is going to be present. Maybe it will be more low areas of the kind of, it's not all the way to the top. There will be some leaves overlapping and maybe covering the sky. So see if you can partially kind of leave a space at the higher branches area. Okay, if it's too dark blue, I might put a tiny bit of lighter tone with it. Okay, now my blue a little bit standing out over the greens. So maybe later on, or while I still have my paler green available, maybe I can touch it up. So I want the green, so the blue to be slightly behind. So my strokes might just of the paler green just slightly overlap it. Sometimes it's the newer strokes become slightly overpowering. So maybe just putting a couple of leaves over it, or just checking the borders of those shapes so they're not too perfect. I think that's looking better. That's good. It's a bit of a strange shape. Again, maybe if it's too smudgy, leaving it for later on and touching things up is good. Okay, don't want to have too much attention to those areas. A couple of my tree trunks are very bold. Just soften them gently, gently. Yeah, I might need to come back to this area to touch up the blues. I think as it's settling in, goes maybe a bit too strong. I want the trees to be a little bit more lost, be less precise, but that's okay. I can work with that. Right, and let's start working on the front. So I'm going to be back to my larger flat brush first, and let's make sure that we have enough of lighter green. So I used some yellow and ochre, a little bit of white and emerald green. I'm gonna add a tiny bit of extra water to it so the stroke goes easily. And let's look for some of the highlights of my leaves. You can make them even lighter later, but let's just find some bigger shapes for the leaves at the front. So stay brave with your strokes. Just make sure that your paint is flowing. That's why I'm again adding a tiny bit more extra water, making sure that the paint will flow. And that's good. It's been still good to have a darker shadow here, but that's okay. Right, so from sketching it with almost like a line to shaping segments. There will be loads of shadows, so kind of semi-unfinished areas would be better to paint rather than very precise ones. There are loads of light, almost like in this corner. Perhaps there is a gap between the trees, and we can see that light over. They just overlap each other so incredibly. These leaves and those shadows and lights are just so playful. Okay, I think I could work with slightly smaller brush now. Gonna move to my filbert brush. Okay. And let's have some playful strokes. Remember, we were doing sketching those semicircles here. So what I'm doing smaller, simpler strokes further away. We're getting slightly wider strokes closer to us. I can overlap my path. Okay. Now working in one color for now, well, as we've been doing, working in one color at a time, makes it a little bit easier to focus on shapes, and then changing the color afterwards or adding to that color is slightly easier to work with. Now what I'm establishing what's happening to the light. So I'm just following the lights through a little bit here, maybe a little bit on the edge. And this area stays more in a shadow. And let's add a tiny bit more shapes in this area. So far it's quite not similar, it's identical color, which we will be changing shortly. Just need that variety. But we're lightening up now the whole piece. I'm just going to touch up my sky here while I've got my colors close by. It looks a little bit overexposed, maybe a little bit too much of it. I think I liked it earlier version, even before I put the blue in, for the how much of the space was left. So I might just bring a little bit of extra leaves over the areas. Maybe I was getting too excited about my blue. But as we said, we can shrink that volume at any point, and immediately it makes it more busier. Okay, maybe not all the gaps. So it's showing enough, but it does give an impression that we're much more into the woods, much deeper woods. The banks are high. I think that's plenty. That's good. More glimpses of that color. I'm happy with that now. Right. Now working into our flowers here. Now I said we're going to change slightly our green into a different one, to a cooler green. But even before that, I want us to do a bit of shadows on our flowers. So then we have a combination that our flowers and leaves are working in unity. So I'm going to have now some white, and I'll mix it with some ultramarine and a little bit of emerald green. So a little bit similar to what we were doing to the sky, but maybe this time it's going to be more into the ultramarine than the blue. I'm just going to place a little spot here that's look very pale. So to make it a little cooler and darker, I might use a bit of violet and extra emerald green. Violet makes it darker, but not just blue, kind of not just making it much blue in its shadow. Okay, tiny bit more green. So those are going to be my flowers in the shadow. So I don't want them to be too light. Okay, I think that's better. I can even vary them and make them quite greenish or quite green and violet together. So it's okay to make that slight variation of darkness. Okay, I'm happy with those varieties. And let's reestablish the sizes of the flowers. So I'm going to have a smaller one at the back, okay, a little bit more bigger one halfway through. I'm just looking for the sizes where they might be appearing on my painting, and I'm doing it in advance before I start painting big blocks of flowers, because I might just get started and get carried away, and that scale is lost again. And I might do a rough, I can see a little bit of outline. So if I do rough placements of my oval, that might be my oval of the flower here. Okay, I'm happy with that. Kind of scaling it up. There's another flower here, but it's mainly in light, maybe a medium, slightly more bigger one somewhere here. So I'm doing an overlay shape. I don't want to do it all solid here because it's getting bigger. Okay, good. Right, and let's go for tiny bit more violet-y or tiny bit more greener. Shadows, so let's place them as a whole. Now I'm going to work them, the flowers, into strokes. So we'll merge into shapes, but I'll try to kind of continue with the excitement of the individual flower heads popping out, standing out a little. Now I will be putting loads of light tones, but even for them, if I were to place some of my darker tones, these initial ones, they will become much more three-dimensional, these flowers. Now, all I'm now thinking of is the scale of my strokes, smaller one further, medium one, bigger ones, as my guidance, as my planning. Also, if I have got some extra whites left or ochres left, it'd be nice to cover that up. Okay, let's have a look where some more flowers going to be here. They're mainly busy in this central area. Okay, I had enough of that violet color. Let's go for a little bit more greenish color. okay anymore. I want to make any connections here. Now I can always paint more, but if I overdo it, it might be too strong. Right, and I want to do some more flowers on right close to me. So these ones I'll do. There are lots of individual kind of each flower head consists of small flowers, which are quite spiky little stars. Sometimes they opened up fully, sometimes we can see part of it. Quite like some of the different pressing on my filbert brush to create that variety of the strokes. So what I'm doing is if I've got a flower of that shape, I kind of work into semi-outer layers of it to decide where kind of the size of it's going to be before I bulk up the flowers. I think I'm making up one here. I think that would be better. And a little bit more white and green. And against the green leaves, those shapes are appearing lighter. And of course we will touch them and the leaves as well. So that's shape somewhere here. That's somewhere here. Quite a big gap here. Maybe I will place something else here. Okay. And also in the distance, I have some flowers in the far distance. So let's cover part of this ochre background. Yeah, it looks broken down. Let's unite it together. Simplicity usually works better. It's slightly clashes with my sky, but I know it's not going to remain that color. Although maybe a violet color there would be better. I might wipe my distant blue here and have it more into the violet. Because my paint is dry there, I can make those changes quite quickly. If I would have left it for longer and it started drying, would have been better. If I wanted to change it, just wait for it fully to dry and then paint over it. Right, so let's do a slightly violet version that will actually link better to the violets at the distance. Right, tiny bit more white for me. Right, this might be too light, so I'm going to test it out. Yes, it's too light, so tiny bit of green with my violet and white. So it's not going to look blue anymore. Okay, that's good. And we're in the last stages of our painting. Just going to the tops of these greens, which I'll be ready for highlights. Okay, the path looks quite wide now. I think I'm ready to turn it to a bit of a stream there as well. Right, so last few touches of the green now, and then we'll finish off our flowers. Right, now let's top up some highlights on our leaves. I'm going to use some extra white with our yellow and ochre and emerald green color. So far, just a lighter version of it. I want to establish little extra highlights. Again, I'll just do bigger strokes in few areas. That's why we haven't done the full flowers yet, because we wanted some of that boldness to come through first. Now play with that, with the highlights. It's not just kind of put each leaf what's, you know, how that light is going to spread. It's the light from the kind of the trees, the branches behind, above us. So it's more patterns. Yes, we'll have some of the pointy ends of the leaves lit up in some sections, but it's not always just attached to specific leaves on their own. It might be partial, it might be little dots, it might be little lines. Kind of observe, maybe keep a close look at kind of the shapes I'm making. There might be some stems left out in darker tones. Maybe some of the stems will be a tiny bit more lighter. How the light coming through. Okay. Maybe some of this one's a little too strong. I just blend some of the edges so it's not too precise as stems. So any highlights behind our darker flowers, mainly on the leaves which we already identified as lighter ones. Maybe we can see some middle lines on some of them. Okay. Now, I also said we're going to change the color gently. That's needs for our shadows. I'm going to go for a little bit more emerald green and ultramarine with our existing warmer green. First of all, I need to cover a couple of gaps here. So if you have got any gaps left by accident, like I have, just going to cover those ones up. Kind of, I'm talking about more of a bigger gaps. And I'm going to add some white to this cooler green. So then I can have a couple of more shapes of leaves, which almost catch the cooler light from behind our branches, which are above our heads. So maybe just to vary that shadow, I think I need to go a tiny bit more into the blue. A little bit too pale as well. Okay, something in between. So I want a small amount of these colors coming through. Maybe in between, maybe little dabs. Quite like those gorgeous dark shadows here, but the shadows of the foreground are a little bit lost. So maybe that's will come here as well. Slightly more violet and emerald green to restore some of those beautiful shadows. And that's where our cooler green comes in as well to it, kind of just to have that extra variation. Even a tiny bit more stronger violet. That's a good one. I just need to be careful with that volume and that specific mark making. I know there will be some flowers. So the brown we've done for the path here, if it's lost, that's absolutely fine. But because we've done it, we remember if we need to have a little bit of sharpness of the darkness there, we can restore it quite quickly. Just in small quantities, just to make that variety. Okay, that's exciting. I'm happy with that. Couple of leaves just to overlap some of my shadows, just tweaking. If some of the layers are too wet, sometimes just waiting for them a little bit longer to dry, and then working on top might be an easier way to introduce shapes. So come back to shapes. I'm ready for some whites now. I think the leaves are looking good, at least for now. Might just leave them as they are. And I will start with the whites for a little bit of white for the stream. So I'm going to have a fresh white with a dab of violet and ochre, but I'm going to have it much, much lighter because I want to have a little trickle of water, or maybe some highlights, or maybe I think that might be quite, if it's your path, there might be some extra shadows and it's just too blank at the moment. But maybe it will be our stream, because there will be a stream somewhere there. I think quite like some light coming through here as well. Again, it just shows that variety of light in the woodland immediately. Right, I'm happy with that. And let's work into the white of the bluebird, of the garlic flower, sorry. Bluebell's already finished in the season. So I'm washing my brush. I'm going to pick up some fresh white and enough white by mixing it with a dab of blue or dab of green or dab of violet. Probably green and blue will be better options. Again, I'll start far back just to get some exciting strokes where I've got more lit up area. As everything else is in the shadow here, maybe there's some more light somewhere there. And let's have some gorgeous, exciting strokes now. Of our, if we can afford to spend extra time to do a subtone, so not direct white, more of an in-between tone. So let's have a look for most light flower heads will be then fresh ones, or if you're painting over the existing shapes, we can do both now. See if we can still leave a little bit of previous color. So don't paint over it all. So there will be more fresher flower heads here. Filbert brush gives you a lovely semicircle kind of touch for the strokes. I think I'll make quite a lot of paler ones in this area. And some bolder ones. Kind of mingling them with the shadows here at the foreground. Just keep looking for the variety of the strokes, so the flowers don't look too, petals of individual flowers don't look too similar, or like a printed pattern. Just make it more organic and natural. Slightly smaller, slightly bigger, something a bit more busier, something a bit more spread out. So less detailed on the flowers further back, but there are some details. And then further away from us, they're becoming much more simplified. Now I'm ready for some fresh white to accentuate the last light areas. So now my bolder whites would always go over some just enough white color. They will make them so much fresher and stronger. Some of these ones fresh white as well. Some will be hidden under the branches. Okay, can I go with some tiny dots, kind of to support some of these bigger shapes? Just makes it slightly more less perfect from the round umbrellas strokes. That's getting nice and exciting. A little bit more spiky at the middle ground for me. And then leaning away or stepping away from the painting to compare. I think I could do with some more sharpening of the highlights and shadows on my leaves. If I use a similar whitish green, I can touch up a couple of highlights on my leaves as well. That's an optional one. My suggestion will be, if you do want to have extra highlights on the leaves or some more playfulness to that, wait for the painting to dry and then experiment with that. So then you can remove and adjust as you work. Don't want to have that gorgeous busy work created now, and then if something doesn't quite go to plan, it's overdone, because it's quite a delicate, quite a lot of smoother kind of details. Maybe just watch what's happening on my painting now to kind of to touch it up later. Highlight in the center, maybe of a leaf. I think that volume of very similar yellowy green, slightly taking attention away from the major paths here, kind of the major darknesses. So we need to partially return that variety and intensity of light. Okay, I need to be careful not strokes not going to appear too similar. Okay, 1, 2, 3 here as well, again similar. I think I could do with a couple of more stems. They don't have to be perfectly attached to anything. It's more of the link of vertical lines to our quite a lot of horizontal shapes. So a watery strokes will be even better. It's not quite a pleasant edge. Okay, I think we're getting there. Let's look at everything together now. I'm really happy with the background. I might just touch up a tiny bit of extra light on some of the trees, which will be a little bit similar to some of the lights on the foreground here. With some of the extra branches, maybe there'll be some more mingled light. Yeah, that's quite good as well. And I think I'm ready to stop. I can see some of my layers here, perhaps they're a bit more diluted, so I'm going to let them dry and perhaps gently touch it up. But I've got some exciting light going on. I've got some varieties of colors, exciting way of painting from very dark tones to medium to lights. So I hope you had fun and continue playing up, enjoying the spring weather and sunshine. And I look forward to seeing you in my future classes. Thank you very much for today.